All right, good morning.
Good morning.
All right, we'll call this meeting to order, and we'll start with opening prayer and pledge of allegiance. If John wants to lead us. Great stand.
Let's pray. Sorry. Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for this opportunity to come and just handle the business of our city. We thank you for the men and women on this advisory board that have selflessly given of their time just to help serve and give back to their city and their community. Father, we just pray for all that we address here today. We pray that we would have wisdom and discernment. We do pray for Chairman Berg. We pray for safe travel for him and his family. And we again just ask that you bless our time together today, Father. Give us wisdom and give us courage in all that we think, do, and say for your honor and your glory. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. That was a good one.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Madam Clerk, want to call the roll?
Mr. Ferrera?
Here.
Ms. Schoon?
Here.
Mr. Banzi?
Yep.
And Vice Chair Henderson Jansenius.
Here.
You have quorum.
All right. Okay, has the board had an opportunity to review the minutes from the last meeting?
Yes.
Any discussion items?
I move to approve, can I put the two different
Yes.
months together? The October minutes and the December minutes were very good.
I second that.
Okay, all in favor? All right. Do we have any staff reports?
I don't have anything. Do you have?
I have none. I mean, there was the ask that I had recently. I believe that I addressed all of the data and information requests via the two memorandums that I circulated about 5 weeks ago.
There hasn't been any emails or anything come in, so.
The only one I did forward an email from Chairman Berg about 2 hours ago. He asked me to pass along one item. You were copied on it as well, Madam Clerk, in regards to just his perspective on some of the discussion today. So.
Okay. Did everybody get that email?
Yep.
Haven't changed it yet. Okay, we'll probably review that during section 8.
Yep. I'm happy to read it officially on his behalf if y'all would like.
Okay.
During that time.
Okay, that'll work. All right, we'll move to audience participation. 2 audience members.
Good to see everybody. Happy New Year. Hope everybody had a good holiday. Once again, I'm here to speak about election timing and
Your name
the
and
process.
Name and address.
Oh, Daniel Schultz, 330 Mercedes Avenue. You know, I haven't missed that in a while, so that's
You're slipping, you know.
I'm slipping. Yeah, I've been out of it for a little while.
There you go.
But once again, over the holiday, I had quite a bit of time to speak with people in my district and my ward about what the potential could look like for changing the dates of the election. Regardless of what the logistics of it looks like, the overwhelming response that I heard was that yes, we would like it to be aligned with the general in November. This committee is tasked with a huge task, taking up a document that hasn't been reviewed in 60 years. There are big changes in here that can be made and that should be made. If we're considering adding things like time onto terms, but we don't want to look at the alternatives for how do we increase participation at the same time, I think it could send the wrong message to voters. So I think for me, one of the most important things to come out of this board could be and should be the changing of the election dates. That's all I got.
Discussion? Yeah.
I appreciate our chairman sending his opinion and his recommendation, but I strongly agree with the audience information statement. And we had discussion. I think we are here to take action. We spent a lot of time in discussion on it. Kicking it down the road doesn't make me feel very good, whichever way we voted up or down. I think we should take action. We're here, the charter has not been changed for over 60 odd years. This is our time, this is our effort, and there's good and bad on both sides of it, to be honest. I lean in favor of changing it because I think citizen participation is huge. I think there are a lot of things happening in the world, there are a lot of things happening in the nation. And I hear people saying in response, I'm overwhelmed, I can't get involved. I don't know this, I don't know that, what's happening, this person said. We need to protect ourselves locally and we need engagement locally. Not only is it good for the city, it's good for our nation, and every locality, I think, should be working at getting people to feel comfortable to participate. And the evidence presented by Mr. Hayes and Baird, basically it increases significantly in November. And I think this is a really critical issue that I'm hopeful that we go in that direction. Again, I understand democracy in our vote, and however it comes out, I will abide by that, hopefully not grumble too much if it doesn't go the way I've recommended, but I don't think we should kick it down the road.
I'd just like to point out that the Deputy Supervisor of Elections, Mr. Cow, has joined the call. If you want to ask if he has anything to share, perhaps, Mr. Chairman.
Jonathan, well, actually just move straight into the next one, into the election discussion. Do you wanna read the email from Brandon Berg this morning?
I will. Give me 1 second. For the Charter Review Advisory Board, this is coming from Chairman Brandon Berg, who's unable to be here today. My main substantive point that you can share is that I'd like to leave out the election timing and process. I still think the alignment with the general election is the way to go. But given the really good debate over the topic, I think it's just too challenging of an issue to include in the charter at this time. I think it's something the commission should be encouraged to address, either during their review of the charter or via an ordinance. Again, Chairman Brandon Berg.
Alright. JP, Ron, any feedback?
Go ahead.
Now, the two of you, I was gonna say, I'm being able to speak, what is happening? No, I've made my position on this clear. I'm still of the position and sort of echoing what Chairman Berg says, that I don't think we should do it. I understand there's popular support for it, I think it's better suited for the commission to take up with their ordinance. I just wanna make the point that I think last meeting, we sort of had a agreement, at least, with maybe 3, to move the general to the general. So that's kind of, I think, where we are now. But my position still is that we should either leave it as it is, or again, leave it to the commission to make that change. I know Ron was the one who was kind of in the middle, but that's the question about if the 3 of you agree to move it to the general. So that's not to put all the pressure on you, Mr. Dancy, but
Well,
I think that's where we were.
and I think this is a good time to remind us that these are all gonna be recommendations to the commission. And they could thumbs up or thumbs down any of it, so,
Absolutely.
Yes.
and I still am sitting the fence a little bit, quite honestly, but I believe that what I hear in the community is that it makes more sense to move it to November, than it does to keep it separate, as far as the date goes. Have a primary in August, if you have to. Somebody gets 50+1, they're elected. Or you go to November for a runoff. So I'm okay with recommending to November.
And just a suggestion, because I know last time there was some debate about how to do the general, so maybe we can have a vote on moving it
And
to
then
allow
come
the
back.
general and then have a second vote or a second discussion about how exactly the details would work out there.
I'm sorry, I apologize, I wasn't here for the last meeting, but you guys got my note, I watched the video, thank you guys for including me. I watched the video and, I did pull, there's a lot of emotions behind this and there's a lot of emotions in the community. I think objectively at this table, our emotions are probably a little bit more invested and a little bit higher, right? Because of the burden that we've signed up for to carry this. And we have a collection of shared experiences here that kind of elevate us to have this conversation. We go to city meetings, right? We're actively involved in the community. We all have different areas, so we carry that emotion a little bit differently. But when I look at the purpose and the burden that elected officials carry in representing all the people, it's important to say, what does the majority of the people say? And that's where I did that poll. 100 people said the experience was important to them, the election experience, right? And if we kind of simplify it, homecoming is the same time every single year, prom is the same time every single year, graduation is at the same time. Like, that was the feel that I got, a lot of the feedback I got from voters was election season should be an experience too, and it should be the same time every year, right? Whether there's voter apathy or participation, like there's all those different dynamics that we take into consideration. Are we overcomplicating it, or are we listening to the people and saying, maybe like what you're saying, everybody said November general election. We're stuck, I think we have pretty much consensus on we wanna move it to everybody wants us to move it to the general election. We're stuck on the dynamics of what that look like now.
I think so.
So do we have a motion to, or should we wait until spring? I mean, this is a big one. Now, we've got months where we can come back, but I'm with you on taking action.
I move that we move the election to November as stated by Mr. Danzy.
Okay.
And then we have, and Mr. JP said, we can, the second motion could be particulars.
Yeah, cause I don't know if there was agreement about the particulars of the model.
So, Jonathan, now that we have a motion on the table, is there, let's talk about that. Can we align the foundation that the structure of the election is aligned with the general election, but then by ordinance, the board can change the dynamics of what that would look like from there?
That's probably more of a question for the city attorney, I think. Was there a second for that motion?
I will second, so we can go ahead and have discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do believe our charter specifically speaks to the, to the runoff procedures, and having, the election is generally in April of the year, and that if there are more than two candidates and no one achieves 50% plus one, then shall be a runoff within 30 days. This would need to be altered because you're talking about August and November, which are obviously more than a month apart. And you're also, I don't believe it speaks to like April or May, but it does talk to there being 30 days apart. So I think you would have to address that part in the charter to align with, basically with state and federal. That's probably the right wording, would be with state and federal elections, which are even years and are then August and November.
As a suggestion, if this vote were to pass, then you could also say, hey, we'd like at the next meeting to look at the different options on how to implement it. And then we can come back and then just address it, and we could talk about it longer at this meeting, but we could then pick it up at the next meeting, and we could give you, when I say we, Caroline and all of us, staff could give you something specifically to look at, which is, one, I believe there is a sentiment to have the primary or the first election in August and the final election in September.
November.
November,
Yes.
that,
I knew what you
maybe,
meant.
but that would be something that would come back to you. So one decision is, okay, how do we do this? And do we have a runoff, or is it a plurality? But then we can give you something specific, and then hopefully that would shorten the discussion. And so probably it's not a plurality, probably you still want 50 plus one, and probably but then do you decide, well, if only two people are running, do you then just have the election in November rather than, so those are, I think we could do up, couldn't we, Caroline? Caroline can do up a menu for us that will make hopefully that decision, methodical, and we can go through it. Second issue, which I do think is purely, well, all of these decisions are city commission. Do you shorten or lengthen the terms of the existing commissioners? Legally, you can do it either way. you can either lengthen them by 18 months or shorten them by 6 months. So I think that's something, and there, you may decide at the end of the day, hey, commissioners, we've given you language for either shortening them or lengthening them. You decide, what you want, if that's what you want to do. But we could give that to you at the next meeting too. Does that help, Brandon?
I have a question. So is the manner of elections governed by the charter, or can they alter that by ordinance? I mean, the plurality, majority, that only is ordinance, or, only charter?
Just charter.
Only charter. So the city commission can't alter that.
Well,
The dates.
today.
They can alter, my question is, they can alter the dates, but the commission can't alter the manner of the election in the sense
With a
of
primary and then a potential runoff.
the plurality and the,
Yes.
what are,
Unless the charter's changed.
that's what I'm saying. The commission can by ordinance change that.
No, yes, you're correct. They cannot.
They cannot. They can only change the date.
Just the dates.
Okay.
Currently, but we could adjust,
But you
the
could-
charter
you
to
could
give
amend
them
the
autonomy to
charter.
adjust by ordinance. So should we?
I don't think so. I think the way that the timing of their own election should be kept in the charter so that they can't decide their own.
So in my mind, Mr. Chairman and board members and Mr. Zimmerman, I think there's kind of three items. There's moving them to align with the state and federal elections, yes or no? And then kind of dealing with the specifics of how to handle August versus November with the percentages and runoffs and all of that. And then the third one is the terms of the elected
Existing.
officials. Do you shorten or do you lengthen it? You're gonna have to do one of those, correct, Mr. Zimmerman?
Transition.
Yeah,
For the transition.
I think those are the three. Is that fair?
Transitional terms.
Yeah, transitional terms. So to my opinion, there's kind of three decisions in front of this board.
You're the chair.
Yeah. Any further discussion on this one? Before we take a vote?
And this is only to move them to align with
Yeah.
state and federal elections.
I
Are
think,
you okay with that amendment? Align with state and federal regulations?
In November.
I mean,
Yeah, that
With
puts
the
it
general.
August, puts it August,
The
November,
general.
yeah.
To the general, yeah. Yes, there's.
I mean, if the motion passes, I would like, I don't know how quickly you guys could pull that, what'd you call it, a menu? Menu together, to help me take back to the community on my side, to provide clarity. Like, I'm getting the same question I'm coming to ask you, kind of the different options or varying options, but the consistency in communication would be important as we gather our thoughts on it, right? And then we take it to the public and we ask questions and we get feedback from them on what are our preferences? Cause it's almost like it's a menu preference now.
I think a couple weeks.
We've done a fair amount
Yeah,
already.
we've already
Okay.
So-
quite a bit. Now, if this motion passes and if you're ready to say something about the next two issues, then I think Jonathan did a good job summarizing it. If you're ready to say how you want to handle the August and November election, plurality, majority, you could adopt another motion. And then if you're ready, but I don't know that you're ever going to be ready to say to the existing commissioners whether they ought to shorten or lengthen their terms. That's a tough one for y'all to weigh in on, so you might just leave that.
But you're saying that would be a consequence of moving the dates anyhow? You would have to do one.
It's gonna
Have
happen.
to do one or the other.
So to add, that would be a commission issue as opposed to the charter issue, because they are allowed to move the elections and then whatever is necessary to implement moving it, which hence would be they either need to choose to shorten their terms by 6 months or extend it by 18 months.
So they don't have to weigh in at all.
Not really.
Yeah.
No.
so kind of
Sure, we'll take that one. Let them decide on that one together. Okay,
So I guess there's only two.
There's only two.
alright, wanna take the roll?
Mr. Ferrera,
No.
Ms. Schoon,
Yes.
Mr. Danzy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brandon Henderson Jansenius.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-2, 3-1.
3-1, yeah.
anything else to discuss in the elections article?
As far as the number two, as far as the timing, it makes sense to me that we mirror as close as we can what's existing with the state and federal, not try to create our own thing. Make it be August, make it be November, whatever those dates are. And
Remember,
not
there
try
used to be a September runoff?
I know, and try not to do anything
Yeah.
just for us, since we contract with the supervisor of elections anyway.
Yeah.
That may be another moot point. Let them do it.
Since this was before the Thanksgiving holiday, if I may, Mr. Chair, just kind of refresh my my memo. So again, Tallahassee changed their elections to align with the state and federal elections or state and national elections in the year 2000. And originally, if only 2 candidates qualified, the election was settled in the August primary. However, the charter was later amended to move the election to November if only 2 candidates qualified. So they're basically, they bypassed the August primary, which is very similar in a partisan primary. You know, if only 1 Democrat or only 1 Republican were to qualify for a specific office, there is no August primary. They go straight to the general election in November. Same principle, same concept. Additionally, if 3 or more qualified, the August primary advanced the top 2 vote getters to November, regardless of the percentage received. And I know this might be a sticking point, but it's only because if you look at the turnout percentages in August, you're still looking at, because it's more of a partisan nominating election is in August for a myriad of different offices, local, state, and federal. And so the thought is to ensure that whoever was elected at the local office, that decision was made in November with the highest amount of percentage turnout. And just for some of those percentage reminders, so even looking at like Panama City and or Bay County. So for example, the most recent one, August of 2024, turnout was 24.8%. November of 2024, 71.9%. So if you did have, say, 1 person out of 3 get 51.3% in August, that would be 51.3% of only 24.8% of the overall turnout as opposed to that. So that's why Tallahassee made the change. Again, this ensured that the elected official at the local level was always chosen in November of either a gubernatorial or a presidential election year. So.
And I will say again, I heartily disagree with that position.
Well, I'm just.
I know that's what they do.
I'm just sharing the numbers.
Having done that, if I work hard and I get my voters out in August and I get 52%, I win. I don't have to run again. This way, I work really hard and I get 60% of the vote, but somebody else gets the top 2. That's just not. I'm not going to ever be satisfied with that. People that show up to vote, that's not my problem. I hate to say it that way, but that's not.
I think I would add, and I did have conversations with the Leon County SOE and the Tallahassee City Manager, and I think the way they looked at it is that it kind of really was a primary in the sense that the August election is not going to determine who's going to hold office. The August election is to determine who will stand in the general election in November. I think maybe that's the way that they differentiate, and that's probably a better way than I've communicated it before. So the August election, same thing. It's even if, say, U.S. Congress or superintendent of schools, the purpose of the August election is to, maybe that superintendent of schools is probably a good example. But in August, even if nobody else qualifies for U.S. Congress, you still have to stand in the November election. So I think that is the difference there. And so that's why if only 2 people qualify, you don't need to have the August primary to determine who the 2 candidates are that are going to stand in the November election, because only 2 people qualified. So that's why if you have more than 2, how do we determine who those 2 are that will stand in the general election in November, that's why they have the primary at that point. And again, it does get you to the point so that the purpose of the November election is to select your elected official who will then, serve in that capacity. So I think maybe that was a better way to explain why they made that modification and why I think a lot of other cities did do that as well.
I think, so I see it a little bit differently than Ron does. I see the elected official, and we'll talk about this one once we get down to the city manager position. The elected officials, how do you gauge how successful they are? Because our current structure, success comes from the city manager. The city manager executes, right? The board doesn't execute. The board makes decisions, but the way I measure how successful an elected official is by how many votes they bring to the table. How much trust do they build with the people, and how many people do they get to the polls, right? And in the powers of our commission, the mayor and the commissioners who have no autonomy to make decisions, the only thing that they can be good at is communication, right? And they have to be great at communication. If they're not, they're probably not a good fit for our structure. It takes time to build that trust, and I'm okay with the time frame from August to November. If it takes a little bit longer for us to gather more votes, that's their only job, because they have no job that is action focused. They can't make decisions. They can influence, but they communicate, and that's the most effective form of what they're elected to do. Does that make sense? Got something you want to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Jonathan, last meeting you had made a good point, which is that for most elections, apart from the city election, we're kind of in the minority of that. Most elections, you do have somewhat of a nominating period where you shorten the amount of contenders that you have, such as an August primary, then moving on to a general election in November.
More concise.
Exactly. So in terms of if we're looking to increase turnout, which is, I believe, the goal with your vote just a few moments ago, a winner-take-all system in August would be the exact same as the system that we have now, but more political. Partisan elections, the most partisan elections that you have are primaries in August. And the amount of turnout that Jonathan just read, which I believe was 24, is around the same turnout that we had in my election in April just last year, which was around 25. So if we're looking to increase turnout, sacrifices will have to be made at the expense of the candidate, for the people. And I truly think that, like I said, we're in the minority of not having to have a nominating period or, weeding out candidates, whereas, just about every other election has got some kind of a, period like that.
So you would be comfortable in a 3-person election in August, and the winner gets 80%, the next one gets
I would call that a rogue
15%,
hypothetical,
the
that's
next
what I'd
one
call
gets
that.
5%, but the guy that got 80% has to run again.
How many, we pulled
That's what you're
previous
saying.
elections, but we pulled previous elections to look at what the turnout was in those elections to see if that had ever happened. And I don't believe there's ever been a time where someone got 80% and
Well, I
had to
just
move
use
on
that
to
as an
different.
example.
But we're making choices in reality, not in hypothetical, and that's a hypothetical.
So I'll just add, Mr. Chairman, that what I have noticed in looking at all, I'm a bit of a political data geek nerd. My comment I'm about to make is anecdotal, so it's not like a true like going and really systematically looking at data, but I do agree that 80% is probably unlikely. What we most likely would see would be someone would barely creep past the 50% mark and get something in the low 50s in a potential August primary if there were 3 candidates. Are there examples where someone hit or exceeded 60? Probably, but I think that would
But
probably be
they're
the
few,
exception.
but it's just,
It would be the exception. And then the other advantage, and again, these are just anecdotal comments I've heard, over the last 5 or 6 years, is it is tough because, if you have a race with 3 or more people, man, like 30 days as we do it now is, really before you've had time to come down from the first, I don't even think the election's really necessarily certified yet, and you're already like, it's time to start sending out the mail-in ballots. So having more of that 9 weeks, in fact, I think a lot of states kind of do stuff more in, March, April, in June, and we do ours at kind of the end of August, which is tough. And I had to do that many moons ago in a congressional race. It was like, we won, and it was a pretty fierce primary, and then we had a 9-week sprint, to the general, and it was, so I think having a little extra time in there is nice if there is one. But I see Mr. Danzy's point, as far as you do work hard and do it, but I think the way a political minded person would be like, wow, this guy has, if you do that well, then you have all the momentum on your side going into the November election.
And having to reschedule that runoff like a month after when I had it, the number one problem I had was that people didn't remember the new election date. It was, they did not understand the runoff process as well, whereas here, it would always be in November. There would be no question about it. You would, if you had to have that, if you had to have a runoff, this would be the runoff, and then it would always be the same date, so you wouldn't have that problem, just like Jonathan said, of when's the election, and then you don't have as much time, and all those issues.
Yeah, I think if I had experienced what Ron has experienced and I was there at 60%, I would want to be done. Had I experienced that, but then from a voter perspective, that additional time, it is election season, I'm already in the spirit of educating myself on what I'm looking for, right? From an official perspective, I completely agree with Ron, but from a voter perspective, having the August versus the November, that's where I kind of say. But we can discuss that at the next meeting, our menu of choices. All right, you ready to move on to Article 7, the city manager? All right, where do we want to start with this one? I have a question. So at the last meeting, JP, I heard you ask for like a communication flow chart. What communication looked like from the city commission to the city manager to the agenda? There's a lot of agenda discussion.
There were a lot of agenda discussion.
Do we, Jonathan, do we have like an org chart for the city, like a visual for what it truly looks like as far as where autonomy rolls up?
What are you talking about specifically for like an agenda?
No, not necessarily for agenda, for the organizational structure of our city.
Sure.
Yeah.
We do have one?
Yeah, I have an organizational chart. We have one.
He does one every month.
Yeah.
It's his favorite thing to do.
You did say it was a
I would love to see it. If you can give us a Cliff Notes version of what is your job as a city manager?
Okay, so as the city manager, I'm the chief administrative official for the city. So pretty much all of the departments and divisions, with the exception of, accounting and payroll, in the clerk's duties, fall to the city manager. So that would be, public works, fire, police, housing and community services, parks, culture and recreation, logistics, and that's it. So, the community redevelopment agency, and so and in that role, I also serve as the executive director of the CRA. So, I have the responsibility for the day-to-day operations of the city, with the exception of the collections of the monies. That's under the clerk and treasurer. I have control over the budget, and then the clerk treasurer has control over the finances, the checkbook. So that's really it. So through senior staff, 2 assistant city managers, and then a number of department heads or directors and chiefs, they run their respective departments. And so typically most of my interactions during the week would be either with the 2 assistant city managers or one of the directors, or / chiefs.
Define control as far as accountability versus responsibility.
Oh, wow. So, this job is obviously bigger than any one person. You can't be down in the weeds on every single thing. So you have to have a high level of confidence in your senior staff. And so, you have the responsibility to to make sure that they're doing their job in accordance with obviously the charter of the city, but also all of the ordinances that the city has, our purchasing and procurement policy that the city has, any other policies that we put forward. And so the expectation is that, those respective directors and chiefs, execute those over their respective department, and they're accountable to the city manager, who is then accountable to the elected officials, to the commission. And so, you kind of have that, that control over it, but you're not gonna be able to manage every little thing that happens out in the field. A very defined chain of command has to exist out in the field. I'll give you an example, very practical. So I would never, reach down and give direction to like a lieutenant or a sergeant out in the field. I would deal with either the chief or the deputy chief, or maybe in very limited circumstances, one of the captains. But typically it's gonna be the chief or the deputy chief. Same thing with public works. I would mostly deal with the director or perhaps the city engineer, and in certain limited cases with the superintendent, who is, kind of managing things out in the field. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, what, in regards to finances, cause I know we've got the city clerk, and I'll talk about that, we got the attorney. You're not accountable for the things that she's necessarily responsible for.
Correct. Our duties are specifically spelled out in the charter.
Okay. So accountability is the department operations, basically, you make sure that the city operates.
That is correct.
From a financial perspective, you build the budget.
We build the budget with input from all of the, all of the department heads, because they're the ones that have the responsibility to know what they need in order to meet the objectives and needs of the city. And then, we put together the budget, and then once the budget is adopted and so the finances, which is the actual spending of that money and the cutting of the checks or the wiring of the funds, that's under the clerk treasurer.
The administrative flow of
Yes.
performing against that budget.
Yeah, that's how we have checks and balances.
But
So-
that shifts responsibility as far as org flow through her department, you're still ultimately accountable to the execution of that financial plan. The budget.
Correct. So if we try to do something outside of the budget, it's not contained in it's not budgeted, then we have to do a budget amendment and show where that money's coming from.
And then the commission has to
They have to
sign
sign off on that after the budget's already adopted, correct?
Okay.
Even if it's 1 penny.
Well,
I mean, I'm just trying to make the point,
with some exceptions.
with some exceptions, but yeah,
They don't make pennies anymore.
they don't, that's right. Out with Lincoln, so.
I have a question about the removal sort of officers, cause in Article 5, you're the administrative sort of person over all the officers. We're in another one, but it ties in kind of my question about city officers.
Okay.
So you're administrative only on those departments that you listed, not the ones that would fall under the city clerk? Or do you also have removal administrative power over the people who work in the city clerk's part? How does that work?
That area does get a little fuzzy, so I mean, I am the personnel director for the city. But from a day-to-day, like I don't pick her employees. If I think the only thing that could really be a problem is if one of her employees did something that I felt they should be terminated and she wanted to give them a second chance, that might cause tension, but most of the time I'm just gonna defer to her specifically for accounting, payroll, and customer service. They fall under her, but when it comes to the signing off on their, she signs off on their time. But again, I'm the personnel director. I don't know that it's ever really
It's
been an
kind
issue.
of a gray area.
It is a
I
gray
realize
area.
that.
I am the personnel director, but for her particular divisions, I just
Yeah,
completely
cause
defer
I
to
only
her.
have 4 direct reports. So my direct reports are above the accounting and utility billing departments. And
And-
so,
And those departments
So-
fall under the city manager?
well,
Do you-
no, those are
Oh, okay.
under my control, but my direct reports are only 4. So everybody underneath there reports to them, but ultimately it would be his decision.
Right, so ultimately, your decision, the only people you cannot remove would be the two of
The
them.
2 of them, that is correct.
But you could, in theory, remove everyone else.
I could, but
Could,
if I
I'm
don't
not
have
saying,
a very
I'm
good.
not saying, I'm not
yeah,
saying
I
that you
could.
would, I'm just trying to understand how the.
I think the way it's
that
written, that would be my
Yes,
interpretation.
That's the way
I
we
can-
understand it now.
I can terminate every employee with the exception of the 2.
Of those 2.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure I was in the right direction.
But I would never do that without talking to you again.
So we're
Right,
starting.
I understand, I'm just,
Yeah,
again.
No, it is a little bit of a gray area when it comes to that. I mean, and I think from a practical standpoint, it works because, I mean, if I go to any of her employees and just, ask for information, their response is, yes, sir, they recognize me as the city manager. But if I would go in there and try to like modify schedules, that's the kind of stuff that would cause, because she's the one that's operationally responsible for those teams. And so that would kind of fall more towards, just like the director, like I wouldn't go to another director and say, hey, I think you need to check, like, that's just kind of, it's just counterproductive. Just even if I have the authority, it's just counterproductive to the operation.
So it's a different kind of relationship than what the chair was talking about with the whole deal with issue with the commissioners addressing the staff.
Right.
That doesn't apply to
He
the
can deal
city,
with them.
doesn't
I
apply to the city
understand,
manager.
right.
So that level of gray area is kind of what I would hope that we can work through as a board to close the gap on some of that. That gray area 60 years ago is totally different administratively today. Does that make sense? So when I ask for like an org chart and the current org chart, understanding that there's an opportunity for us as a board to review
Yeah.
making some adjustments to that and really streamlining the workflow. I'll share this with you guys. So last spring, I forget what we called it, but there was we got to meet all the departments in the rotunda downstairs. They all set up, so police chief, fire chief, HR,
Strategic planning
I think it was a
Yeah.
strategic planning session, which was great.
Open house.
Yeah, it was like an
Turned
open
into an
house.
open house.
And I had went around, I got to meet everybody, I got to talk to the finance department, the water ladies, and they loved Jane to death.
They say.
They do love
They
me.
There's
say
actually, there's actually one man in there now. It's
Oh,
not just
good.
water ladies.
Yep. Good, so my point is, I had made it a point to ask questions like structure and organization. The fire department has a phenomenal structure, right? The police department has a phenomenal structure. The HR team, when I asked her, I said, if I'm a city employee and I wanna advance inside the city, what does that look like? What does an opportunity for growth look like? And she said, well, we don't have anything written out, we don't have like a process for that. If they're interested, we would ask them, we'd talk to them, and I said, okay, well, if I'm not performing at my job well, what does that look like? And she said, well, we'd have conversations, we'd maybe find you another spot in another department and see if there's a better fit somewhere. And my ops brain we start moving problems. And we start to throw people at problems instead
That's
of.
the role of government.
Yeah, instead of having a process in place, right? And the process being, do we have a phenomenal organizational chart that's clear, right?
He's about to put it on the screen.
Okay. And understanding what does the org chart look like, if I'm not doing my job well, do I have clarity on what I need to do to move forward and do my job well? And I look at this from your seat from a department head perspective, right? You're accountable to a lot of things. We have a city manager government. I do see our current charter blurs policy versus administration, right? And I hear the board asking for autonomy, and I hear them asking for more power. What is more in regards to that? And is that really the right thing when you're ultimately accountable to execution of that power, right? And I've seen, being in Panama City all these years, I've seen different boards and different commissions, different city managers in the role, right? And everybody operates differently. And there's a level of autonomy that's great, that empowers that, but that's not scalable as we continue to grow and our city's growing. So what level of organization do we need as a foundation inside the charter? Make sense?
That makes sense, but I don't believe that comes underneath the charter. If we hire a city manager, that is up to the city manager to get into the weeds and put together a team. That's not,
I think that's great,
that
but
is not the part of the charter.
could that level of expectation be part of the charter, that the city manager is accountable to having a strategic plan that's executed and implemented once a year, signed off by the board? But it has to be clear and has to be intentional. And then the people have to know what the plan is for the city. It can't be in the city manager's head. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But do we have a process in place? And same way for you on the finance side, Jan might not be here tomorrow, Jan might not be here for 20 years, but the foundation of how we report and how we present all lines back to there's a standard way for communicating this. One, to Jonathan, who's ultimately accountable, from Jonathan to the board, and then our phenomenal communicators, which is our elected officials, to the people. That makes sense? So when we look at this, city manager, this is the city, it would be the city manager structure.
Correct. And of course, as you note, so Mr. Zimmerman, Ms. Smith, and I all equally report directly to the commission.
But under this structure, it looks like the city clerk and treasurer is accountable to the finances for the city, not the city manager. The city manager is only accountable to the assistant city managers, public city affairs, the assistants, and the budget managers, down to the department heads.
Well, if you want to open that and talk about the city clerk's position at the same time, I'm of the opinion that the city clerk should be hired and done by the city manager, not by the commission. Then that changes the org chart somewhat. But I don't know how many cities do it this way versus that way. I just know what we do in business, and
Well,
the city manager should, my opinion, everything should flow in and out of the city manager's office.
And
Everything.
And just to piggyback on that question, what's the reason for the separation there? I understand it's the actual writing of the check and that part of it to make sure that you're not writing a bunch of checks, is that the purpose, or what is the purpose of that separation of those duties with the city clerk and the manager when it comes to the financial aspect?
my understanding is that it's a system of checks and balances.
Right, so and what,
Yeah.
can you give me, give me, just so I understand it fully.
But in the checks and balances, if the city clerk's office made a blunder, they're gonna go to the city manager. They're not gonna go to the commission.
Well, they,
I mean, if something
They would,
happened,
wouldn't they?
if something happened bad and they get the budget or see something that we can't afford or whatever, they're gonna go to the city manager and say, Jonathan, how did you let this happen? That's why I think the
Well,
CFO, if you will, ought to be under the,
I think the thought, Mr. Chairman, would be that if one of my directors doesn't follow the purchasing policy, I mean, any charge has to go through both purchasing and through the clerk treasurer's office. And so, if one of the directors or one of their direct reports is, made a purchase without following, the purchasing policy correctly, which happens, and, they have to be counseled, potentially written up, it falls to both the purchasing division, which falls under Mr. Self as logistics director, and or Ms. Smith and her team to bring that to my attention, and I can assure you, both of them do that when it happens. But if something is spent incorrectly and it gets through both purchasing and the clerk's office in this current environment, then I think myself, Mr. Self, and Ms. Smith would all have some questions to answer.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I think the key distinction is the separation of duties, that the manager doesn't have control of all of the moving parts. If something happens and the manager wants to spend more money than he's allowed to, there's nowhere for the clerk to go except to the manager. There's no third opinion to apprise the commission that something untoward is going on here. Right, because the attorney doesn't get involved in any of that kind of stuff. So it's like you said, it's a check and balance. If the manager holds all the cards, he can tell the commission whatever story he wants to tell, whether it's true or not. Similar to, I guess, what happened at the TDC. The guy made up the story and nobody followed up to check on his story. Sorry, sure, go ahead.
Oh, yeah,
agree with
former
you.
clerk, yeah.
And it has happened. I know, because I worked through several city managers.
And
I'm sorry, would you just say your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm
and just
Terry
so people
Lillard.
know who you are who are
Yeah,
watching
I'm
online.
Terry Lillard. I live at 1016 West 9th Street. And
And you
I'm a
were,
former city clerk treasurer. And I had been in the finance department for many years before that.
Thank
And I have experienced times that the city manager has wanted expenditures to go through that hadn't gone through the proper authorizations. Usually they should have, something that should have gone through the city commission. And I didn't pay it, so, and that was totally within our realm to do that. So I think that's what the checks and balances are about.
We're blending accountability with responsibility though. Because he's accountable to that, doesn't mean that he's accepts responsibility. He's got department heads. There's old saying, if I gotta do your job for you, what do I need you for? Right, so if our COO or administrative operations manager for the city has to do department heads' jobs, what do we need them for? Cut the budget? Let them do it, let them own it, but that's not how we're structured. Are we structured for growth? The city is growing. And I asked you, Jan, when's the last time you had a performance review?
We're going through it right now.
Okay, and is it clear and objective and you know exactly what the areas are you need to improve on?
Well, everybody has opinions about that.
Right?
No comment.
And figuring it out, so right now, there's no framework for evaluations or performance reviews. And I'm with Ron on this, when you look at a business structure, because our city operates as a business, right? And you look from a people lens, what's the one thing that everybody goes to complain about?
Marvins.
Well, that too, money. We're broke, we ain't got no money, it always goes back to finances. Our one person who's accountable to that is the city manager. He develops the budget, right? He's not responsible. Each of the department heads have department head accountability to perform to their individual budgets. It's like every department has an assigned line item on their financial plan for execution that rolls up to the enterprise, to the whole city budget. When you look at levels of business structure, our structure is currently not clear. I feel like we're tasked to provide that clarity and streamlining what does it need to look like for now and for the future. Currently, it's not as scalable as it should be. Does that make sense? Not that Jan would be accountable to the city manager, but there should be some sort of hierarchy and shared responsibility, shared accountability as they both report. I think it says both of these positions, all of these positions, including the city attorney, serve at the pleasure of the board. I heard Jonathan say that a million times,
Except for.
right? What is the pleasure?
Whatever they feel
That-
like.
Majority.
Right, that means they can be removed, whatever.
just because they wanna see a change.
They don't like the color of my shirt.
Yeah, they can be
Well,
removed.
there's provisions for removal.
Not,
For city manager,
not in all of them.
Yeah.
after post 6 months, and that's
No, no,
still not
true.
clear.
Well, and Navin, correct me if I'm wrong, is that a requirement of a procedural due process part there, that special removal provision, is that just something
Just
happened there,
there.
they decided to do it for,
It's just there. For example, both the city manager and city clerk, and city attorney, we all have contracts. And so removal, things like that are all spelled out
In the contract.
in the contract.
And
So
that's-
it doesn't need to be there.
But inside the charter, it does say something about 10 days and
well, that's
taking
just.
I just-
that's
for
just-
it.
City manager.
Yes.
I
That's-
disagree with that. I mean, I've seen a lot of organizations, it just takes one rogue person. And frankly, I think we're seeing it nationally. A lot of things were understood, this was the job of Congress, this is the job of the president, Congress can declare war. If you have someone who doesn't want to follow traditions when things aren't written down, it's hell to pay to stop it. So I like having guidelines, and a process to check, and keeping them separate is one way, that's very important. But when you say that the process of removal doesn't have to be there in our charter, that gives me the heebie-jeebies. Because it just takes one rogue person, and everybody's running because this person can fire everybody in the room who wants to complain. Well, talk about whistleblower, this is an area that I'm very knowledgeable of. talk about whistleblower, I mean, you really have some major disasters. So there needs to be check and balance, and I think that's our job, to put it there and not rely on the gentle ladies and men to do the right thing, because we have examples locally, we have examples statewide, and we certainly have some examples nationally where written documents are being challenged and you have to sue to make you do exactly what it says you have to do. And in the areas where there's nothing written down, it's just very corrosive. It makes people feel like there's nothing they say is gonna matter. Back to getting civic engagement and getting people to believe in the process. I think we need to look around and see what can happen when gentle men and gentle ladies' attitudes about protocol and due process and fairness differ greatly. And if that person who has that viewpoint of the world, might makes right, forget about other groups that we've long done and things we've long done, that's a problem.
What, just to clarify my statement,
Back it up.
no, legally, you don't have to put anything in the charter.
Right.
Because, for example, there is something in the charter, that's some due process stuff for the city manager.
Yeah.
There isn't anything about the city attorney or city clerk that deals with that topic. Don't know why they wrote it that way, but you could certainly, as a matter of policy, recommend to the city commission to put all that in the charter. It's not there now, except for the city manager.
I noticed that, and I think that's
Yeah,
not good.
One potential option, Mr. Chairman, board members, and I'm just kind of listening to your comments, I mean, as a suggestion to channel my inner Mr. Zimmerman. I mean, if your concern potentially is, you know, that people get, you know, willy-nilly removed or whatever, you could require, okay, simple majority to be hired, but maybe a super majority to be fired. So that you don't just have like political wins potentially having influence, and I think
That would be a step.
I mean, that's just one
Very
potential option,
modest.
so. I don't think you would ever wanna completely tie the hands of the elected body from removing a charter official. But if you wanted to try to make it, you know, a little bit harder to fire someone so that it's not willy-nilly to, you know, that's one potential thing that the board could consider.
I feel like there's gotta be clear objectives to, if somebody's going to lose their job, one, they shouldn't see it coming, should be surprised. And then two, if, like, we find out after the fact how we performed against our budget, right? We get little updates throughout the year and we get a lot of reports on cash flow from a people perspective, and people go crazy because they think we're broke. Like, I see it from a different lens because we're reporting on cash flow versus the long-term integrity of the budget. Ultimately, you're accountable for the budget, but like, did you redeem your budget last year?
So I think maybe that's the perspective that you're missing. He's only accountable for the budget, which is 1 year. I've got to keep the city going forever.
Solvent is her job.
I've got to keep it going forever. And it also goes back to the deal with issue. If the clerk is working for the manager, then that's another person the commission can't reach out to and direct. They might want to have direct control over their finance director, right? And not just the budget director. Just another issue to keep in mind.
Y'all ever heard the phrase, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time, right? So if Jonathan is accountable to a one bite at a time budget year over year, small habits compound. Like the bigger picture initiative where we raise the red flag, which you're accountable to, right? The long-term integrity of the city. He is responsible for that, but you have accountability. That's where you answer directly to the commission. The commission changes every 2 years. Like, and if operationally you're accountable year over year to redeeming the budget, did we win or did we lose? If the budget came in according to, you did your job, you can't get fired, right? Those levels of conversations aren't clear here at City Hall, and they're definitely not clear out to the public.
I think there's more at stake if he doesn't make his budget than he gets fired. That's against state statutes.
Yeah.
We have to have a balanced budget, so
Yeah, I
there's
mean,
it's not a choice. We
yeah,
don't have a choice
We
here.
have to present a balanced budget, and then that's what the commission adopts.
And it's even like the timeline, like, you know, we have to have 2 budget hearings in September of every year and all.
And this is by statute.
Correct, yes, ma'am.
Would you look at policy versus administration, why does the commission feel that they are accountable to the budget? Why do they feel like the people hold them accountable to the city funds? If you guys are the ones that are signing off on what gets spent, you build it.
They have to approve the budget,
They do, they approve it,
yeah.
and
So that-
ultimately, they
so that's
sit
their
at the top,
accountability.
right? But
Yeah,
they
they're-
don't get to play around with the money no more than you get to play around with performance reviews for Brandy's logistics director.
Anything that changes, any significant changes, they control. So if there's an increase in any budgetary line item within specifications, they have to approve
Yeah.
it. So that gives them the additional level of control
I
and
was
accountability.
I was being a little facetious with 1 penny, but in all seriousness, so our directors can spend up to 20,000, assistant city managers can spend up to 50, and I can spend up to 100. Anything over that has to go to the commission for their approval. However, even if we have a $7,000 budget amendment under police, which has happened at the last meeting, that's well under Mark Smith's, you know, level of spending authority, but that $7,000 budget amendment, or maybe it was 9,000, had to go to the commission for their approval.
It depends on if the overall budget is increasing, right? You can move money inside the budget, and you'll get your little finance 101 class. I guess maybe we're here, so maybe the next meeting, I'll put that on the
Yeah,
agenda.
that could be good.
Staff
So you
report.
can move money in between, like the police has a line item for operating supplies. Well, they don't really need the whole 20,000 for operating supplies, so they wanna move 5,000 over for repairs and maintenance. They need it there. They can do that kind of stuff. Inside, nothing's increasing. They're decreasing one line, they're increasing another. But if the overall budget is increasing, the commission has to approve that, and they're accountable for that, those increases.
Alright, so getting back on track, some things that I had wrote down, I said clarify at the pleasure versus due process. I think this is what Cecile was asking. Should that be a charter item?
Well, I think that has to be.
Yes. So do we wanna instruct staff to help provide some language that brings clarity to at the pleasure versus due process, especially in these roles that do roll up to the commission?
I mean, I think all 3 of them are at the pleasure as it currently stands. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see language about the city attorney serving at the pleasure.
No.
I don't think it's in there. I think that's just a mistake when we were drafting, but they just didn't include that in there. Cause I think that is the perception. I mean, I don't see why that would have to change, cause I think that those 3 positions, again, considering the limited scope of what the city commission has and the powers that they have, that is one of their big powers, right? That's the whole point, that's what they're doing, they're setting the high level, and I think that's part of it, right? Their power comes from the fact that they can appoint and remove those 3 main officers, or however we wanna back. So I think it should stay as at the pleasure. Again, whether or not we wanna change how, you know, the vote, maybe it's 4 instead of 3,
Yeah, I had in my notes supermajority for removal.
you know, that might be,
Yeah.
something we can consider, but I think it needs to stay at the pleasure.
And I also wrote in my notes the word stability. Because you look at other cities around and they have new managers every season. That's not good for a city. So somehow we have to get, and maybe it's a supermajority, maybe it's but some stability that an office, so a new election happens and you have 3 new commissioners.
And we are, right, we're
And
gonna have that.
they get rid of a great city manager. We should not, somehow we need to, I won't say not let that happen, but there ought to be a check and balance in the charter that just a political whim does not happen. Especially for a good run city, or even a bad run city, but you know, it's, stability matters in government.
It does.
It does.
It does, and I remember, so when Jonathan got hired, the last commission, the last mayor said, I want a performance structure. and had no clue, neither was it the board's job to develop a performance structure. We should already have one in place, right? That was fair, consistent, and promoted stability for the city manager role. But if I look at what that structure looks like today, I don't know what it looks like. And the people won't be privy to, is John performing in his job, right? That's an HR thing. But there's gotta be a guide for that protects the city, protects the manager position as
absolutely.
well. That says, hey, he's been here for 10 years, here's the last 10 reviews. He's been a great, like all of a sudden now we've got a mayor that doesn't like him and he wants him gone. Like, these are real life examples that we just recently
They are,
experienced.
and
Yes.
I'm not trying to be difficult, but I have trouble squaring the conversation that we had about the necessity for turnout and the voice of the people versus this conversation now. So the whole point is that we wanna have more turnout, cause we want the people to be heard. If they elect a group of 3 people, and let's say they campaign on, I'm gonna remove the city manager, that person gets elected, I don't understand how we're gonna square this whole thing that people need to be involved, but then we're not gonna allow them to then follow through on what the voice of the,
It doesn't have to be an extreme in any way, shape or form. There could be willy-nilly guardrails on all the processes. Because we are literally observing today where different states are crashing down guardrails that were assumed 10 years ago, assumed. So I'm observing what's going on and what can happen. And frankly, I'm thrilled that our little community doesn't seem, from my eyes, and others may have a different opinion, to be doing that kind of, we don't care about the rules, we just want this point of view to, and someone from the top said this, so I'm gonna agree, even though internally they don't. I don't see that happening here, but I still feel like let's have our guardrails reasonable on all
but in terms of what though, I'm not understanding how that connects back
Well,
here.
I'm responding to your point.
Mhm.
We wanna give voice to the people.
Yeah.
And you are assuming, unadulterated, listen to the people with unadulterated, listen to what they want. And if they chose bad commissioners who are also want to harm an innocent city manager who's doing a great job just because the political winds changed, I think we need to protect in all areas reasonably.
If I look at it, I see from Erlin and I see from yours, if a elected official is campaigning on removing people,
Yeah.
then they're not educated. They need to be campaigning on, I'm adjusting the process.
I understand, that's just a
right?
hypothetical.
And I look at Lynn Haven, for example.
It's happened.
They just fired their city manager.
Right.
And was it because, from what I've read, she did a great job a couple of years ago. Like, she managed to a budget, she did her job, so why did she lose her job? And it's because the expectations changed, expectations shifted, and they didn't close the gap on clarity, providing clarity out, either for her or in her role or with the elected officials. Right, and that's where we have to be objective, did they do their job? There's a core value, there's a purpose.
Yeah.
Then there's performance. The two have to meet.
I agree to an extent, except for the fact that these are political positions in government.
Yeah.
And I think it's different, if this was just purely a business, then yes. But here we're talking about a government position with political appointments that are being made. So, and I think that's part of it, right? That's part of it. This is where, again, the accountability is gonna flow down back from the public. That's the only way that they have to reach into it, so.
Okay, let me speak from the point of view of a civil rights lawyer who's been practicing in this area for about 35 years. I sued the city of Pensacola where the fire chiefs had black babies with nooses around their necks as a joke in their drawers and testified to that. Nooses were in the fire trucks for black firemen when they didn't like them. When you have a community and tradition of racism, intentional, bias, think it's a joke, whatever, and the community that's been oppressed has fears and experiences where we have living people whose relatives were killed in this area. It's not documented. The fear is there, the oppression is there, the sense of being out of the loop is there. So when you say give full reign to citizens in areas like this where there are, 200 or 300 years in this whole area of oppression, and up into people's lived experiences who are still living now, I don't take any comfort from just let the people have their will. Because there is the effect of oppression, which makes people disbelieve, not trust, not want to participate. And I'm talking about primarily Black people and a lot of times poor people, regardless of race. So it's comforting to them. It's comforting to me as a direct observer. I should write a book of the different statements that have been made by bad actors who thought it was a joke or who did not connect the dots. So having seen and heard and dealt with these kinds of things, it is helpful and brings confidence to the entire community when you have guardrails. Because there are people living now who've seen what can happen without the guardrails. So I'm just speaking, it's not just, purely, intellectual. We have to deal with the residue of being mistreated. I would speak to the same thing with women. There are so many women, myself included, coming up, I'm 66, were propositioned improperly as we're coming up by active duty officers who are great men, rah-rah. But because there were no guidelines and rules against it. And when I talk to most women my age and younger, most of us have experienced that. So that's why guidelines and rules to that community are important, because it encourages me to feel strong in my viewpoints and not to feel threatened if I speak against my manager who has the appearance of white male power, even today. So there's a lot going on. You sound like you've been, coming from a world of insulation. People generally who look like you don't generally have a historical experience of being mistreated or treated differently just because of what you look like. So there's a lot happening here. And I think for us in our environment and the reality of it, to put these guidelines in encourages people to get over their community trauma, encourages people to participate, encourages people hopefully to run for office from different segments of society because they trust the process. When they've been taught by their elders, it's not going to work for you. You have to leave Bay County. I've heard that so many times. For professionals of color or people wanting to move up in the government, you gotta leave. You can't get that fair treatment here. We need to turn that away. And so what we're talking about is not just for everybody, but it's acknowledging and the historical facts of how people were treated differently. So that's all I think I need to say on that. So I'm coming from it from that perspective, in addition to, I don't care who you are, what you look like, you should be, if you have a job, it's my humble opinion, and you should be given reason why you're fired. There should be a way to protect your job, whether it's a simple administrative hearing of 3 people. There should always, in my opinion, be a way for a person to feel they were heard. We're Americans. We're not, we consider the Russians to be off with your head, you're out of here. So employment is considered one of the fundamental rights, and a lot of our constitution is written around that. And again, when you get into areas where there's historical, factual mistreatment and different treatment for communities, it's important to just have those guardrails.
I don't think removal should be easy or hard, but it should be clear.
May I say something?
Sure.
What's your name?
Name and address, please.
What's your name?
My name,
Uh-huh.
JP Ferrer.
Okay. Brenda Lewis Williams, 2748 Oak Hammock Drive, Panama City, Florida. Fundamentally, what you're saying is legitimate. But at the same time, I don't see where you can make a delineation between government and corporate world, because a government entity is basically a corporation. If you lay side by side the city manager and a corporate structure, you have city manager and you have the CEO or the president. Your board is the commission, and then whatever the board of directors is, and then you come all the way down. I believe we need to get out of the habit of separating those when we look at evaluations, hiring and firing, because essentially it's the same. That corporate managers, corporate presidents, CEOs are fired all the time for whatever the reason, but it must be justified. Now, I will say that, but I think you have to stop thinking that political and corporate are separate, because if anytime you lay one side by side, you're gonna get a clear picture of what a corporation is. And I suggest that your city is a corporation. It is a business. It functions as, you have all the components of a business within that. So if you structure evaluations, and that's what I'm referring to, if you structure evaluations, hiring and firing, aside from any nepotism that may take place, then you need to look at it as a corporation. Because that's what it is, simply put.
Any feedback? Ron?
I kind of want us to get us back on track. If we are looking at article about the city manager, we kind of need to go section by section and just deal with it instead of what we're doing now.
Well, I would say this, I think for all important issues, we've had a generalized conversation just to flesh it out. This is where Cecile's at, this is where JP's at, to sort of put the flag in the ground. And then we go, as you're saying, it's probably time right now, as you're saying, to go to specifics, let's read what we have and analyze them. But I think I appreciate hearing everybody's perspective and their point of view. You as a candidate and feeling I've carried the ball. I've gotten to my 52%, that's really important to me. I may not be persuaded, but I now understand your thinking, so those generalized comments are helpful. Now we need to get to specifics.
Okay, so section 100, do we want to make any adjustments to this?
How important is it by members of the committee that the city manager live in the city? Is it important or is it not?
Critical.
Because we've had both. And it really doesn't influence their
I don't think, at the time of appointment, I don't
Yeah,
think it
no.
matters, I think it matters afterwards.
Yes.
well, that's not stated here either.
Right.
And I don't know if it really matters. I mean, if I may perform very well, be the best city manager ever and live in Bonifay.
Yeah.
For that matter.
My observations is, and I've seen that certainly with the school board, when school board members would have their kids totally in private schools, financially making decisions in the public school. To me, that just gives me the creeps. You need to eat what you kill and be in that environment because you have different inputs of information because your wife, your child is experiencing whatever you don't put in the budget. And I just think that reality check is helpful.
And the other thing in this paragraph about not holding any other offices or, I understand the budget, but did this reference, I don't know how the League of City does it, but do they have city managers that are part of this board or whatever of the League of Cities? Would that paragraph permit you from joining
What
a
section?
city?
Mr.
Section
Vance?
100, it says you can't hold another position other than engage on behalf of the city government. Would that include a
Well, no,
consortium of other cities? Could you be a member of that or not?
right, I see what you're saying. No, so I think what that is like I couldn't go and be, say, say the congressman's chief of staff.
Sure.
At the same time that I'm the city manager, that would obviously be a conflict. However, I am an elder in my church. I have been involved on the American Public Works Association's national committee, state committee. And I believe my contract speaks to certain civic organizations and other organizations that benefit the city of Panama City. My understanding is that's dealing with like full-time employment that might pull my efforts and focus away from the city. I don't know, Mr. Zimmerman, Ms. Smith, is that your understanding? That would be my understanding.
But we could
Okay.
clarify it,
Yeah.
I'm all for,
So
Clarify.
That's how it's
being
written.
involved with the Florida League of Cities, being involved with the with the Florida City County
professional.
Management Association,
Right.
being involved with the Public Works Association has value for the city, just like Jan's part of the GPO,
I'm not an officer, I'm just.
well, but you're a part of it though,
Yeah.
GFOA. Did I get it right? GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association or officials. So there are certain organizations that bring value, but it's not a full-time job that is pulling me and my efforts and focus away from the city.
And maybe that's something for Nevin's office to look at y'all's contract to make sure that it's in line with the charter and vice versa.
Yeah, maybe
Because then,
removing
you know-
some of the language from here
Yeah.
and saying, referring to employment contracts. And employment contracts can change, cause I did write that down, I said the ban on any other business is strict but vague. Like it doesn't mention what is any other business, is that conflict of interest, gifts, is it outside employment, like teaching or writing, do you have a second job you sell at the farmer's market, like.
I don't have time for a second job. I'm sure you get that.
I know that's true.
Yeah.
But if you did, it would be, there's no restriction, should there be a restriction here or should it be tied directly to your employment contract? And maybe you do come, well, I've got a secondary business that I do with my kids where we paint rocks for a living and we mail them out all over the world, who knows, right? But like that shouldn't be in question as far as a charter perspective. That should be something that's negotiated on the front side and you're clear from an employment perspective. Because what happens, I've hired people into my companies and they have 2 jobs, you can't serve 2 masters. That's ultimately what this is coming
Yeah,
down
yeah.
to is, this is your primary job. But what is any other business? So should we have that removed and replaced with per your employment contract?
No. Again, employment contracts, they vary greatly by the skill and experience of your city attorney. I mean, I've seen employment contracts ridiculous. And then some go too far. I mean, that's again too much of a variable. I think we're setting guidelines, basic guidelines everywhere. And if the contract wants to lean over the fence in some way because there's some particular thing that the city manager, potential city manager has got going, whether it's a not-for-profit or whatever, that can be addressed with the contract, but I don't think it should be whole hog, whatever the city attorney and commission come up with. Because their level of experience, knowledge, exposure to laws, which are constantly changing in the employment area, the Americans with Disabilities Act is relatively new. In the past, you couldn't walk up the steps, you're out of a job. You didn't have to have a job. So it.
But I don't think the charter needs to be that specific though.
No,
Okay.
absolutely not that specific. But to just say, take it out altogether and let it all be contracted, I think is dangerous.
Maybe a suggestion would be, let us look at how others have dealt with this issue in the charter, and I believe, Ron, you're right, it's not crystal clear. What you've heard is how it's been interpreted in practice, but let us look and we can give you some ideas how others have
Back
dealt
to the
with this
menu
issue.
concept.
So we can bring back section 100
Yes,
to the next meeting.
yes,
The menu.
that's
The-
acceptable.
But I do know y'all talked about that time of appointment. I do think that needs to be clarified because the beach, just as an aside, theirs is a little bit more clear because it says at time of appointment, you don't have to be a resident of the city because they may hire someone from Cincinnati. But within 6 months of signing the employment contract, he or she must be a resident of the city of Panama City Beach. So I think either we need to have that requirement or we need to provide
That
clarity
sounds
to.
I like that.
extremely reasonable
I like
to
that.
give a new candidate an opportunity to get settled and
And I think that's an opportunity for commitment, you know,
Oh,
and
yeah,
how committed.
absolutely.
If they live in Bonifay and they wanna serve here, hey, it's important to us that you are part, you're here,
Yes.
and you're available.
Absolutely.
You're not an hour or 2
Oh,
hours
good
away.
point, good point.
Absolutely.
disagree.
And if that's not important to you, that's okay, we'll look for the next person that it is important to. Okay, the second part, compensation. So this is something I wanna talk about. I know we talked about, oh, go ahead.
Just, you want to see a draft with that 6 months, within 6 months?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then review the
Right,
any other business portion.
go ahead.
Compensation, this is something we could probably close the gap on. I know there was discussion at the last one about compensation for city commissioners. Did we close the gap on that side? And is there, Jonathan, right now, compensation is subjective. It's not objective.
My initial salary as city manager was set by the commission, but then I'm eligible for anything else that a regular full-time employee is, as is Ms. Smith. Mr. Zimmerman is not. So based on, because we are paid for by the city.
He's
So we
contracted.
like we get our step increases based on seniority. If there's any cost of living adjustment, we get the same thing as all the employees get. So
So I say this from two things. Let me get this out before I get, was it the last commission meeting? How not unprofessional was it that a citizen came to the board and said, wanted to scream out your salary, which we all are privy to it anyhow. In that moment, at a decision-based meeting, not an appropriate discussion. But then two, if I look from my experience and specifically in following the Lynn Haven experience, I've heard that their city manager was hired in at a lower than salary than the previous one. And then she was fired and eliminated for that. And a lot of discussion, a lot of hearsay, a lot of subjectiveness, right? Do we need to be objective with salaries, commission, or compensation and pay raises across the Panama City enterprise, all the way to the board, to the commission? I don't know what their pay looks like. Who signs off on a commissioner getting a salary increase? Is it standardized to how much commissioners make across the state? Is there an equation for your position, for all the positions that removes that subjectiveness and provides objectiveness, like a standard?
So I think a lot of people do it differently. I think some cities do what you just talked about. They kind of look at, there's some formula driven by the state as far as the elected officials. Ours is basically our commissioners make the same amount as the lowest grade full-time position. And then the mayor gets a little bit more. I don't know if that's a percentage or a flat fee, like.
5%.
Yeah, I think it's 5%. I think Ms. Smith is right. It's like 5% more as mayor. And so as far as city manager is concerned, I mean, there's a lot of different factors, I think that go into that, the population of your city, like whether or not you have a fire department and a police department, for example, Mr. Cook in Callaway, they use the sheriff's department for all law enforcement. He doesn't have a police chief and a police department that he's directly responsible for. The years of experience that you have, so I mean, I think you need to give, my opinion would be you need to leave flexibility for your elected body. Obviously, they can't violate federal law in any type of employment situation. That goes without being said, hopefully to some degree. But I think, I don't know how you would, I think you see a myriad of issues. I mean, you got some city managers that make, $300K a year. It's almost double what I make, but again, it's probably a city with, 700,000 people, and so that's a lot different than Panama City, so.
How's it determined in the private sector?
Yeah,
Is there
it's usually revenue based.
Well,
for employees?
Well, the
The
hourly wage
CEO,
based,
I think you're
yeah.
talking about like the CEO.
Executive, like I would consider, if we're looking at this from a business perspective, everybody at this level is like an executive type position. Your position, whatever, you're a little different, you're subcontracted, right? You're not a city employee. So it's a little bit different, but it all comes back to a revenue mix and what that allocation of revenue looks like, In his defense, that plays into a fire department, a police department, and as we grow, we're gonna add another fire department.
If you had a business that had $400 million annual budget, it's probably woefully underpaid compared to the private market.
Absolutely.
I think we all are, ma'am.
well, I mean, what most governmental entities do that I've observed, and also not-for-profits, they do a survey. They do a state survey, they do possibly looking at what's national, and then they look at cities that are about the same size nationally as Panama City, but with particular interest in Tallahassee, Orlando, Bonifay, the low end of what executives or governmental executives are making with the high end. Same thing with attorney's fees. When I win a case, and JP knows, what we gotta do is, I just can't walk up to court, I'm worth $600 an hour, which is low probably for California civil rights lawyer with 40 years experience. I have to establish what is the going rate in my 2 or 3 hour range, and that's just reasonable, because it's somehow connected. So, I mean, that's something we could consider, giving some guidelines, not the end of what the number is, but we look to these areas of information to make your determination. So it's not just, I like this guy, he's nice, he goes to my men's club with me, here's your money. It's based on your experience, what the locale does, and then they come up with something, hopefully it's connected with reality.
Mr. Chair and Board, so obviously in the process, the Florida League of Cities and the Florida City County Management Association has resources, salary studies that they could share with the commission during, and typically what would happen is, if it's my position, the city manager's position, they might task the clerk and the attorney to work together to provide information to
Exactly.
sort the resumes, working with HR and that kind of stuff. If it was the clerk's position, they might ask the city manager and city attorney to do it, that kind of stuff. So there are resources out there to help provide information to kind of get to some type of potential number, so.
Perfect.
And then who does it for the commissioners?
So right now it's locked in with the charter. I think the charter specifically says the lowest full-time paid employee is the salary of the commission.
We have an ordinance. It's not charter driven.
Oh, it's not, okay,
But it's
beg your pardon.
but
Sorry.
it's clear. It's well, I say it's clear.
Yeah.
But anyway, it says it's the lowest full-time paid salaried position.
For
That's
the
what they-
commissioners, and then the mayor gets a little bit of a bonus for extra duties and that
So
kind
our
of stuff.
commissioners make as much as the lowest paid full-time employee. in
And
the
what is
city.
that number?
It's a grade 4 position,
$16
yeah, it's around
$17.
$16 an hour, like 34-ish K a year, I think.
I think that's right.
Yeah,
37.
37,000.
Can you pull us a report so that, one, we can review that, maybe not the ordinance, but whether or not it needs to be a charter item? But can you pull us something that says what the rest of the state is doing for their city commissioners? From a salary perspective, is there a baseline? Do some cities do it from a baseline? Do some?
Well, I remember that was Commissioner Street's suggestion to us in that email he sent us last meeting or the meeting before, where he laid out those proposals about changing the.
I just know listening to the commissioners and being privy to their chief communication officers, right, their board, they get a lot of communication, but this is not their full-time job. They all have other jobs, right? But wouldn't it be awesome if it was? If they could, maybe not operationally, because they can't get involved in administration work. But communication wise,
They get paid full-time salary.
yeah,
Just for
$35,000.
just for the grade 4, yeah. So just an observation, Mr. Chairman and Board. So, it's, I keep asking myself, why do people feel like, they have to go to the elected officials when, and they'll wait and come to a public meeting, when if they just emailed staff 2 weeks ago, it had already been handled. It's very simple. It's because they just feel like it's easier to get to the person that they voted for or that they recognize as their elected official versus some bureaucrat at City Hall. And I may not like that, but I'm okay with it and I understand it. That's why. And so I think that's why naturally people go to, to them. Plus, in my role, like they may be getting ready to vote on something and they can go out and state, we should do this. I and my communications team can't really do that because I would be then putting pressure on them in advance of a meeting to vote a particular certain way. So, I think, I think that that's why there's this, even though it's counterintuitive because like literally like, we
I
had
can
someone
tag you
come
on
to,
Facebook to
someone
get a
came to a
response.
town hall meeting to raise a code compliance concern. And I was like, well, did you even reach out to code compliance? She goes, no. So, and a part of me, I kind of felt bad because she she said, I gave up my Saturday morning, I needed to come deal with this. And it's like, if you'd have just emailed us like a month ago, this had already been handled. But for whatever reason, she didn't know, or she felt that she wanted to come talk to her elected officials that represent her in that end. And I mean, people have the right to, so I think they just feel like they feel a deeper connection to an elected official at all levels versus just the staff. So I think
Sounds
that's,
like a area for improvement for our city manager.
well,
Yes, we're very intimidating.
yes.
So I'll write this down, listening to the last thing, the agenda discussion from last time, I'm sorry, I'm getting off track a little bit. Giving flexibility to commissioners to put things on the agenda, which they already have, right?
They do.
The purpose of that commission meeting is to make decisions and to take action, right? Talking, we now have an opportunity that's outside of that, what do you call the workshops, right?
Yeah, the workshops are for the commissioners and the mayor to discuss their items. The town hall is for us to discuss items that the public wants to talk about.
Yeah.
Two very specific, different reasons.
Yeah, being intentional with those purposes of the commission is a decision-based meeting. We're here to make decisions on these items that are on this paper. Discussions can be tabled to town halls and workshops,
Correct.
right? Okay, that was just something I wanted to share. All right, so compensation, we're good with leaving this. Doesn't need to be a structure change to the charter. Aside from-
we were saying that we wanted some guidelines.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I'll work with really all three of us, probably work
Amazing.
together on kind of like what a lot of other cities do is what I thought y'all asked us to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as far as city commissioners as well, what other cities do. Okay, all right, removal, section 102.
Can I raise something also, and I don't know if this is the right place for it, but the administrative officer, when we're talking about the powers of the city manager, and we touched briefly on the ability to release people from employment. I don't think that, well, when you do your menu, if you would look to that too, Caroline, if there is any process tied to the city manager, if he wants to remove somebody from office.
Well, everybody else is civil service, so they have the civil service process.
Okay, that's good to know.
Everybody except for us three are
So we
civil
don't,
service.
so the civil service, by definition, there's a hearing, hearing opportunity
If
to
they,
be heard.
if they request it, yes.
Okay, perfect.
I would, it's,
I don't understand the point of section 102, especially after, again, my concern was maybe there was a procedural due process case or something, knowing that area of law, especially because it's only upon the first 6 months, or having served 6 months, I guess. I don't see the need for this.
Yeah, the 5-day and the 10-day demand seems well below current standards, like surely we don't demand a hearing within 5 or 10 days, being as big of a city as we are. Like, is that even necessary to be in here?
How would, 2 points I'd like to make quick to Cecile's comment on employees. We do have civil service, it's adopted by ordinance. There is a mention of civil service in the charter, but it's just kind of an offhanded mention in section 103 subsection 2. And this is under city manager, it says, subject to civil service provisions to appoint and remove all subordinate. But there's no definition of what that means. But there is we do have an ordinance, but it's not required by the charter for whatever purpose information that is. But we have an ordinance for civil service, which has a variety of different due process issues. The second point I wanted to bring up is that by contract, we operate by contract when it comes to removal of all three of the chartered officers. And all three can be removed without cause if certain provisions are followed. In other words, there's severance. So if there's severance paid, you don't have to show cause. If there is no severance paid, then you do show cause. That's with the city manager and city clerk. With the city attorney, it's, you just give notice and then there's you kind of work out, it's 90 days and you pass off your work and all. So it's not a severance provision, it's just, but it's all spelled out in the contract.
Does the
So,
contract say for your 3 positions, since you are basically hired by the commission, that it's a majority vote, super majority, or does that even mention in your contract?
oh, it's majority vote. Yeah, I mean, it's like any other contract. If you want to change it, well, no. Termination, it's a majority vote. All that is majority. Anything that deals with the 3 of us.
So there's the employment contract and then there's the charter. The charter clearly defines that he shall have 5 days from the date of removal to demand written charges in a hearing.
Right.
And if we are following an employment contract, which rolls up to a charter, and we don't do this process, the city is at risk.
No, because that is there to protect the city manager.
Yeah.
The city manager has agreed, I don't need that protection, I've got a contract.
So his
So-
contract
so no
overrides
third
this
party
due process?
Excuse me?
His contract overrides the defined due process of
He's
the charter?
agreed to a different due process, which is I can be terminated at any time provided you pay me however many
20
weeks.
So
20
should we
weeks.
remove section 102 from the charter completely?
That would be, I would, back to having basic standards that are foundational to the foundation, the most foundational document that our constitution. I think there should be some basic guidelines. We could put a sentence in there, if the city manager or clerk choose in their contract to waive these foundational rights, they can do that.
And Brandon, I was quick to say, because I'm gonna defend the contracts that we have, but everything can be clearer. And what Cecile has suggested does make sense, that, I mean, this is there to protect the city manager. If the city manager agrees to something different in the contract, then that would.
And I
So
think
your
that-
employment contract supersedes the charter?
No,
Is that what I hear you say?
no,
Within
That's what I
the
heard.
attorneys in the room,
the contract
isn't
cannot,
this a way to get in? You did not follow the 5, and it just applies to the city manager,
Well, but
doesn't
they-
apply to.
That's the point.
This thing, they get removed and then they'd have a second hearing and then the commission has to vote on it again. That's the way that it's done right now.
The point
the
that I.
contract can't
Supersede that.
supersede, just like I can't write a private contract to supersede the United States Constitution. I can try, but it would be void. So what it is, if we wanted to allow the flexibility I hear people talking about in a contract, there could be a sentence added to whatever's left of 102 after we make changes. Just give the city manager, the clerk, and the attorney the ability to differ from the basic minimum protections with their contract. You are delegating the possibility, the option, so to speak. You can make a better deal or a different deal.
Here, I'm gonna play the devil advocate. See, I've never been a city manager, but if I applied for the job and I read this 5-day thing, and then my contract was something different, could I say, oh no, you didn't follow the 5-day thing in your own charter, you don't have grounds to get rid of it?
An example from JP's world, I think people have right to speedy trials. I don't know if it's constitutional right, state law right, or what.
They
have right.
They never take advantage of it,
And
but they
guess
have the
what?
right.
They waive them every day.
They waive
They
it.
waive it. So
You're allowed to waive it.
I view this as a waiver
Yes, it would be.
of this right that's in the charter to protect the city manager if he enters into a contract that's different.
I think the more basic question is, do we like this system where if a city commissioner is removed, do they get another hearing, the commission has to affirm it or not? That's the question.
You mean city managers.
The commission, right, so the city manager's removed, the commission's voted for it. They get another bite at the apple where they have to present the written charges. Do we like that system where they have to come back and confirm it or reinstate it? That's, I think, the initial question here. Do we like that system?
I like the idea of the employment contract. I'm gonna trust the professionals in the room that we're paying for employment, right? If that has to change over 10 years, cause we're gonna be reviewing the charter every 10 years anyhow. What I would like from a removal perspective is what's the process if a city manager is removed for an assistant city manager stepping into the position? Like, is that process clear? What if he is removed? What do we do from there?
That's a good
The
question.
commissioner just appoints an interim.
That's ordinance.
They would call a called meeting or emergency meeting, you know.
I don't feel like the removal portion of this is a foundation, a structure concern. I think that the employment contract will cover that.
I don't think that it's an issue of the employment contract, but remember, this is the most powerful person in the city. I think what the point of this process is that someone gets fired from the position, they're unhappy with it, they want to have a public hearing where the charges have to be presented in public, so that the public is involved in the discussion, and then they confirm it, and I think that's the idea here. This isn't just the employment portion of it, not to mention that it's also a protection for the person who's doing it, right? This is again a political system thing here, it's not just their employment part. And that's the question about, do we want that additional hearing, or do we not think that's necessary, that that'll be handled in the process where the commission chose at first time to remove the city manager?
I think it's nice when people are exercising decisions outside of normal fairness and due process to have a secondary look.
Right, that's the.
And he chooses to do, the city manager chooses to do this, so.
Correct. He may
if
demand written
by
charges.
vote he gets removed, he's just can pack his bags and leave, or he can say, let's go
Or if he
all
thinks
out.
that something's not right with the commission's decision, like to your point about the fact that, you think a city commissioner, he disagrees, that's the point of
Okay,
this. The
I get
point
it
of
now.
this is in a sense the
This
only.
protects the city rather than the
And
person.
Well, it's both,
So both.
it's a check and balance issue for the city commission, when they've removed the most powerful person in the government, for them to have a public hearing, saying, alright, give me exactly what happened here, and are you sure you wanna do this?
And JP,
That's-
I love your
the point.
extra comment that it also brings in the citizens. It's not just
Right.
about one to two fairness between the power structure and the city manager. It's an opportunity for the whole community to understand and feel validated. I mean, if there was a process like that in some of the other cities, things might have been addressed at an earlier level.
And I think the reason why this is here and not in the others, because again, the city manager is the most powerful person from the charter that we've got.
If
So
I'm
that's the
being
question.
removed, here's the reason why, and I'm taking this to the public,
I have a
and it's
problem.
100% clear.
And then that's why it's kind of odd in the sense that you would figure the commission could vote, but then they could also then later turn around and say, no, we're gonna reinstate you.
Well, they might get more information.
That's right, that's the whole, but
Yeah.
that's the system that whoever wrote this.
It was actually
I
being
guess so.
thoughtful.
Professionally, if somebody raises a red flag, the professional thing to do is, okay, we're suspending you until pending the 5-day hearing, we're gonna fact find, and then we can reinstate you potentially.
That is the idea, and that's the question, like, do we like that system or do we think that system needs to change? That's the idea here.
I think it could be better well defined.
Sure.
Maybe if we bring,
Would you like us to look once again at how others have dealt with
yes,
it?
yeah,
And I will, and this is a good exercise for me also. I will look at Jonathan's contract and as far as how it goes with this, as far as that goes. But let us see what other charters have done on this issue.
if you don't mind, I would say we do the same for the clerk
Yeah.
and for the attorney, and
Sure.
say, let's keep it consistent with a removal language for each of these
Okay.
primary positions.
Yeah, I want a hearing.
Okay, ready to move to 103, the powers and duties?
Yeah, I think that's the one where,
We got a lot of the weeds in
I
here.
think, that's the thing, I think a lot of the issues that people have raised would be, it's the changing in the powers and duties of each of the three.
Yeah, this is what he's accountable for and responsible for.
Yep.
This clearly defines.
That's it. Yeah, that's the.
Okay, let's jump all the way to paragraph 9.
Mhm.
Jonathan, are you the purchasing agent?
Yes.
I am.
So there's ordinances that restrict
There's
your.
a policy.
Yes, there's
There's a
policies.
policy. Well, I guess
Set by the commission.
do we adopt the purchasing and purchasing and procurement manual through ordinance or just through vote?
Resolution.
Just a resolution, so yeah, so we have a purchasing policy that sets spending limits for department heads, assistant city managers, and city manager. Even down to the level of, at what point do we have to get a comparative quote? And then at what point do you have to do a competitive quote, which would be an invitation to bid?
So number 7, to keep the city commission fully advised as to the financial condition and the needs of the city, and to submit for its consideration an annual budget. Those are 2 different things for me. Annual budget is the expectation by X date, which is the end of the fiscal year, whatever. But to keep the city fully advised as to the financial condition. This is not clear. This provides shared responsibility between the 2
Yeah,
of you.
and you'll see that under the clerk, it says, shall issue, shall recommend, should talk about monthly statements.
Well, and that's what I was gonna add to this paragraph, to put the monthly in there.
They're in here somewhere.
Under yours, but not under the
Oh,
city manager. If he's gonna advise, if I was on the commission, I would want it to be advised every month. And it may be in the Smith's part of the charter, but it's not in Jonathan's, so I think it ought to be in both places. Just,
I agree, and I go back to.
it would be hard to hold him
accountability.
responsible for that when it's not the finances are not his
Well-
responsibility.
Well, but he is accountable, so.
Right,
Shall furnish to the city manager at any time such reports, data, and information as may be necessary to inform the latter as to the financial affairs of the city. That's on 124, the last section there. I know it says something about monthly reports, but I can't find it.
so should the city manager be advising the commission on finances
on
at
the
all?
financial conditions.
Yes.
Yes, to me, but the way I'm hearing it is no.
Well, it's not clear, because the clerk is the one that's preparing the document. And I guess because it goes on the agenda, it's going through the city manager. I'm not really sure how it's not clear.
The financial condition is so subjective.
I think the difference is I don't really control the checkbook. She does.
But you report on the condition? And what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's the question, like, what
That
do we?
is-
That means he
It
turns to Jen and says, give us a
Yeah.
report.
And then, so you just get the report from her and then
I would
you-
say this
you-
was,
Exactly.
I would say
Here's my
this is
report.
this is a perfect opportunity for y'all to fix this.
Yeah.
Definitely, it is out of whack a
Just
little
making sure
bit.
there's no
Yeah.
blind spots here.
Yeah, no, it's not clear.
What I see, Jonathan, is like, we've got 2 commissioners who are finance folks, right? Brian Granger and Josh Street. Josh Street on a smaller, but Brian comes from a different analytical perspective. Their strengths in that dynamic should be our city manager's strengths. Like, you should be the one that has foresight into our budget. If they're talking about selling this or purchasing that or doing this or doing that, where you say, hold on guys, this was not in the budget. If you do this, you have autonomy to make this kind of a decision, but I have to go adjust the budget to make sure that this works, cause I'm still accountable.
That's what
Yeah,
happens.
I mean, I can still do that.
That's what happens.
But we do it,
But
it's
it's
a
more,
lagging indicator
yeah,
and
but
not
I
a
mean,
leading
but we have all of y'all know that government budgeting is different than, we don't have one big checkbook. There's lots of different buckets. And there's also the investment accounts too.
There's one checkbook.
Well, you know what I mean. There's different accounts.
Big checkbook.
I call them silos.
Silos,
Different
that's a
silos.
better way to put it. And then, then we have the investment too, that, we have that, and that's really her. So, well, that's the clerk. We wanna try not to personalize it too much, but it is the clerk's.
Must
Well,
be code.
She manages that investment portfolio on behalf of the city.
Okay, so we're on number 7.
Under what section?
We're
Run through your section.
Oh,
I read the others and they seem fine. So, maybe being too technical, I would like to hear have the city commission hear directly from the clerk. And the way it's written, it's like you give the news, even if you got it from Jan. They should have the opportunity to speak directly to the person who's keeping the checkbook. And I think that should be said here.
Okay, I disagree professionally. And I manage $300 billion worth of businesses a year. My CFO speaks a totally different language than the rest of the world. Jan does too. And that language has been used against Jan in the past. And I understand that component because I'm the COO, which is the Jonathan of the room, right? It's my responsibility I'm accountable, right? She's responsible. We communicate peer to peer, but I have to go deliver that to my CEO and to my board, right? And then I close the gap on the language and how it feels and what it looks like, understanding there's a lot of different dynamics in silos and cash flow integrity, money coming in, money going out, like investments, there's a lot, but that's where that the accountability with who runs the city. Financial component, there's been so much lack of clarity this past year that has eroded trust because the language isn't clear, right? And is that because the right person's not communicating it? It's not what's being communicated, it's how it's being communicated. We're talking from a financial lens, which is her skill set, but that should be the operator's responsibility to go communicate that to the board. If she gets up there talking numbers to a bunch of people and we get new commissioners, 2 of them that are not finance driven, it's like speaking a totally different language. And it makes sense to her, but nobody else.
I totally get what you're saying and it's very logical and makes good sense. Again, looking for the outlier situation, if we have a city manager who is twisting things around and the only person city commission hears from is the twisty city manager, it would be nice for it to be a process where they can go directly to the person who has the authority for, you understand? And I just didn't want this sentence to be potentially misused. It's my job to speak to the commission, you don't get to talk to them. Because there may be times when they really do wanna talk to her. So I like this idea of generally having the CFO, COO be the main communicator because that's his or her job. I like that idea, but I don't wanna foreclose the ability to talk directly.
I just see it from a lens that there has always been a gap in this area in our city. There is still a gap in this area in our city. And if I'm looking at one person to solve it, it would be our city manager. To close the gap on how we communicate finances. I don't feel like that would be the city clerk's responsibility. Does that make sense?
I do, but I don't want to foreclose the ability of the city commission to talk to her directly if they so chose.
And I don't think that's not what we're discussing, right? Cause she still answers directly to the city commission.
And there's gonna be a box for her,
Yes.
so we can address my
Well,
concern
and
there.
that's what, you were in the restroom, so
Yeah.
both of these positions under the powers and duties have a financial obligation, it's just not clear. What does that truly look like? And who's accountable, and then moving forward. I think we should, maybe this is another area, city managers across the state, what does accountability of finances look like?
He's accountable.
Yeah, I mean, he's ultimately
accountable.
accountable. But should he also be responsible, or should the responsibility on the mouthpiece go to the city clerk?
I'm from the business world. The CEO takes the lead.
Yeah, I'm exactly.
I mean, and now that I'm in the charter school business, my board expects that of me as CEO. They're not talking to
You're
my
not a finance
bookkeeper.
guy.
No.
You have to get educated,
Yeah,
just know
I'm
your
there.
numbers.
Yeah.
Do y'all feel like that's a weakness currently in our
Is that a problem?
structure?
I don't perceive this as a problem.
I think the way it is now, I mean, again, you can have people with yeah, I'm gonna step away from city manager and just go, look, engineers, okay? I mean, you got some engineers that, yikes, like, you know, they should not comment publicly.
Yes.
But then you got others that are just naturally very outgoing and communicate and not necessarily in engineering speak. I think that applies to CPAs, to, you know, to business manager folks, to lawyers, I mean. So I don't know if it's necessarily the position or the role, it's really the person. And so I perceive that I feel like the commission now, and I know we keep saying, you know, you don't wanna make it about who's currently in these positions, cause we're all gonna, you know, we'll all be gone one day. But, you know, I sense that the commission appreciates being able to ask both me and Jan questions about the operations and or finances of our city, and that we both are accountable to them. And I'm not worried about, you know, necessarily what Jan might do to me if I say something or vice versa.
I'm not, if they ask me operational questions, I'm sending them to Jonathan. I'm not gonna try to make something up. And I would hope that he's doing the same thing when it comes to the finances.
So, I don't even have access into the accounting systems and stuff. I mean, maybe I do, but I don't know how to get in there, which is a good thing. So if money gets spent, like, you can't really look at me.
Well, I can't spend money. I mean,
I understand what you're saying. You don't initiate it. You're on the
Right,
tail end
yeah.
of it, yeah.
And there's been so much opportunity that gets blended with how we're performing for the fiscal year versus how we're performing enterprise or
I
for the
think,
next 5 years.
I think some people in the public just did that for political reasons. I don't know how you completely inoculate against that. You know?
True.
You know, I mean,
If
it's,
you give a quarterly meeting or a quarterly update on the current fiscal financial plan, and then maybe she does it 2 times a year against the bigger picture, we've got 12% in our reserves. We should have 10%. Let's start working or 15%. Let's start working towards that 15% with next year's financial plan. Like eating the elephant in a smaller bite. We can come back to this, but I feel like there needs to be additional between the two. Additional clarity that is provided. Alright, any other comments on this one? Any other powers that should be here that aren't listed?
I think there's a vesting clause somewhere, isn't there?
testing.
Somewhere.
Are you interested in seeing other charter provisions, other charters, how they describe the city manager?
It's kind of like a job description that when I write, you know, the last bullet's always in any other thing,
And
and
any
the
other
CEO
thing.
thing. And number 8 kind of gets that,
That's
every other thing, whatever comes up by
right.
ordinance or resolution, he has to do. That kind of gets it all to me.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Motion votes yay, he has to do it.
Gotta do
That's
it.
all there is to it.
I think all of them have that, don't they? Yeah, in addition to the duties specified, yeah.
Do you think we can make it through the city attorney?
Yeah.
I think
We're
so.
working on till 2:00 here, so, okay.
I think, you know, like I mentioned, I don't think it's in here anywhere that the city attorney serves at the pleasure of the commission. Unless I'm wrong.
It doesn't have the buzzwords, but
And the removal
Shall
portion, we
appoint.
talked about that.
And there's no removal portion.
We'll just mirror that, I think, in each
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that's a good one.
we can just do the same.
Was there a time where the city attorney was on staff and not subcontracted out? No. Okay.
Just kind of a housekeeping thing. The city attorney under 105 must be a qualified elector of the city. And there's a little difference between being a qualified elector and a resident. To be a qualified elector, you have to be a resident, but you don't have to be a voter, I guess. I guess that's a distinction.
I had that underlined because I didn't know what that meant.
It just means I think I've always read it to mean I've registered to vote.
To vote.
So we can just put residents, but that we ought to, my point is that the city manager, if they're to be if he or she is to be a resident within 6 months, then ought to just make it the same. City attorney.
I would agree with that.
I agree.
Well, and since we do subcontract out, and it's great that you are the primary attorney, do you have autonomy does your company, our contracts with your company, right, with Burke, do they have autonomy just to throw any attorney in whenever they feel like it? Or are you specifically listed?
Yeah, the contract's with me and Burke Blue.
Okay.
And then, so I fill the role as city attorney. And then, but the contract, I'm an employee of Burke Blue. And then in the contract, it explains that we delegate, or I control the work as far as how it gets done. And,
But Nevin J. Zimmerman by name is the voted on
Yeah,
city
I'm
attorney.
the city
Does that
attorney.
answer your question?
Yeah.
What?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just processing that.
Yeah.
The others just have the title of
But
assistant city attorney.
Would it be
And
helpful?
and I saw that, so the assistant city attorneys are appointed by you, right? Is that your decision? Is that right?
The assistant city attorneys are in the contract. There is one assistant city. Okay, let me back up. We have a contract. And I don't even know that our contract, what do you call the attorneys from Burke Blue that work on city work? I've just always called them assistant city attorneys because they're assisting, they're helping the city attorney accomplish the work. It is that our contract says anybody, I don't know what it says now, I have to think about it. But it's anybody at Burke Blue that is delegated that work, and I'm responsible, it's my job to make sure it works. Before I forget it might be interesting to you all to see all of our contracts. Have they ever been sent to you?
No.
Do you want to see them?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it might be interesting for you, so anyway, so we can send you all that. So no, it's not an official city commission designation.
Right.
It's all,
So just to understand how the power delegation goes, the commission delegates all of these powers to you, and then it's up to you to make sure that those powers are executed.
right,
And you have some leeway on how to do it.
right.
Is the same true for the city clerk? In a sense?
Well,
You want now? What's the question?
she's not a contract employee like she is a contract employee, but
Right.
she has city employees. She's also just she is a department head.
Right, and you don't have any city employees.
I have no city employees.
But you could, in a sense. That's what the charter as it is now
No, I mean, they could.
could, right? Okay,
I mean,
gotcha.
the charter doesn't prohibit, I guess it does not prohibit in-house city attorneys. Don't know for sure how that works.
Okay, any other changes to Article 8?
You mentioned the removal language, you're gonna mirror the removal
Yeah.
language here. Did you wanna put something in there about transition? Cause I think an attorney might be a little bit harder to transition than the manager or the clerk.
Well, not since the contract is with Nevin and Burke and Blue. If something happened to Nevin, somebody's gonna be
That's just,
stepping in.
that's just Nevin though.
No, if God forbid something were to happen to Nevin, there would be an emergency or a special called commission meeting to specifically name another attorney, and it may or may not be someone from Burke Blue. That's up to the commission.
Interesting.
But the way it's written is they have to be a voter in the city.
Yes.
Yeah, well,
Correct.
we're gonna, I think we agree that it should just be changed to resident.
No.
No? Okay.
back to everybody being in the same pot.
Or I guess mirroring the same language the city manager has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Sorry,
should
yes.
you should get your fingers singed if we have a bad process. I mean, I think that's self-corrective. If we look at the national level and congressional people voting on who gets protection with subsidies and the system of healthcare, but they get free healthcare for the rest of their life. And the people that work really hard, the same people who are there with them late at night and bringing the reports that they sign off on, don't have access to it. Everybody should be subject to what they vote on for other people. I just think it just keeps a sense of honesty and a sense of trust.
And we'll give you, I think the point was, if I'm just called a qualified elector, he's called a resident, the city manager. So maybe we ought to just use the same.
Elector.
Elector,
Yeah.
okay, so we can
Let them,
use them both as
let
electors.
them,
Now, we'll
deal with what they're putting out there.
we'll present something so you can make that uniform.
Yeah, it should be uniform.
Okay.
And y'all are making notes on all of this stuff, so when we get we'll worry about what we said 6 months ago,
The
yeah.
assistant city attorney is taking
Yeah,
notes.
we're gonna tell you that's exactly what.
Yeah, you'll print us out a new charter and we'll say, I didn't say that.
I take a little chicken scratching between my
Yeah.
little.
Is there any specific duties, similar to section 103 for the city manager? And I'm thinking through consistency, having the same powers and duties for the city clerk. Is there anything specific that should be under the attorney as well? Like powers and duties, I mean, it's got duty to perform
I guess,
services.
yeah, it's all in 104 is what they
Anything
did.
missing there? Well, it's under 106 too. Appointment and duties, and then duty to perform services required by commission.
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah, you're right.
All of it's in one, I mean, the other, and once again, it's the contract that I really go by.
Yeah.
We'll distribute that around and then you might get some ideas.
Alright, so we finished with the attorney? Are we done?
211.
We're past due. Do we wanna table the city clerk?
We have another meeting January 22, just
I
FYI.
think just because we're on a certain level of understanding and flow, let's just take a first stab at city clerk, and if we need to come back to it, we can. Because we've kind of gotten the dust mites and cobwebs out of our head with regards to these three special employees, and we can take advantage of that clarity now.
Board in agreement? Keep going?
Yeah, so let's hop down to 13 then.
Alright. We have section 124. Somebody spent some time on these sections. 132. A lot of sections here. Alright, 124. City clerk and collector, is that two people or is that one person?
One.
What is a collector?
It's now it's treasurer, right? City clerk / treasurer.
Okay, so we can clean that language up to today's terminology?
Well, I am the collector. I'm still the collector.
Meaning,
I collect all the funds
okay,
that come into the city. Treasurer's a broader term, I guess. Treasurer's a broader term. Because collector would be.
Are you the CFO? You don't consider yourself CFO?
Clerk.
do we have a CFO?
Is the city clerk section, is that I literally have everything except, I have 7, 8, 9, and 10. That's
It's in
oh yeah, I'm talking about these. I don't have one for the, I don't have one for clerk, I have manager and attorney.
You got mine, 'cause I'm reading out of the book.
Oh, okay, thanks.
That's where I'm on the
Do you want a separate one?
I would like one like, do you have one like that?
I have one like that.
Is it, how do I not have that? Is that from today?
There's a lot of paragraphs.
I
I just saw the one,
Yes.
and I'm like, oh, we did not do that.
It's very long.
I didn't even unclip my agenda today, I'm so
Just
sorry.
making a point of formatting, right? We wanna follow that city manager formatting
Yes.
where
Yeah,
I think that
yes.
might
Change
be
the
part of what
formatting.
is going on.
The powers and
Yes, and then the
execution,
numbers.
the removal, have
Yes.
it clear so it's consistent
Yes,
across all.
very.
Yeah, I think that the consistent formatting will be helpful.
Caroline, did you hear that? Alright.
But I also understand that the city clerk and collector has to have more detailed parts of it, I'm sure.
Or binding.
Well, first of all, do we think
Or
it's a good,
bindings.
do we think it's a good idea to have the duality of the main functions of the job in one person?
That's been raised before.
Because I just heard my neighbor here saying, I just write the check, like there was something that was more expensive. And in fact, I think you were saying, I don't do that anyway, I do this other thing. So it's
I said I can't write it, I can't spend money because of my authority.
Yeah, then
That's all.
there was, yes, then there was
That's all
another
I
thing
know.
that popped up that you said that you didn't do. You know, with I'm just wondering if it's really possible for one person to do all the things that are laid out.
It's a big job.
Why,
To
let me ask
really
you,
do it, to really do it.
why does the water department fall under you instead of under
Because
operations?
they collect money. They collect all the
She's
money.
gonna take all the money.
What's the difference between collecting money and paying money? Cause all the other departments pay money, spend money.
I'm not the spender, I'm the collector. I don't know. I review every check that gets written. I have staff that review all the P-card transactions.
So from a customer service perspective and you managing the water experience, you could manage funds, but I'm trying to figure out how did it get under you?
We have discussed separating those two and it's just not tenable because there's so much overlap.
It would require more employees than are necessary. Is that,
Probably.
that's, I think, was kind of the discussion.
I think I think we're not gonna be able to drill down to the level, because I know my energy level is starting to really wane. But there were a couple of times that we were talking about things that fall under the clerk definition that I got the impression you did not actually do. So I think as we look through
I
and
have
we,
staff that do, the things that I don't do, my staff are doing.
okay, well, maybe we could clarify that.
Yeah,
So at the end of the clarification of what you do, and when I say you can clarify, my staff does it and then I sign off on it.
right.
If there are elements that in fact you or your staff are not doing, then that would be informative of whether, if what is not being done, if there's anything that's not being done, that we either see in the description or we come up with, that would inform our decision of whether we need another full-time job or how we address it, if at all. It could be that the things, if any, that are not done don't really matter, we don't care, and we just roll on. But I just think that we need
And
to.
I don't know why your section is so wordy
Well,
and none of the other sections
that-
are.
That was my question.
She's more complicated.
Legally, she is, but legally, is all this necessary?
Can't we do them like JP suggested, the powers and duties similar to what the manager is, just have bullets for her? She's not doing all that work, we all know that, she's not doing all this, but her departments are. So, I mean, it seems like we could shorten it up to
There's
oversight.
There's some very anachronistic type terminology in here, so it might be useful to, let's pull a modern charter and look at it.
Yeah, as part of it, I
Under
don't,
the clerk.
I don't know enough about the
Yeah.
counter signing and bonds and
It
the
feels like
technicalities
this
of
was
it.
written for a person at some point, or,
I think they had maybe some issues.
yeah, I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
so.
It's odd.
I think so.
So
it is.
they had.
That's why it got complicated.
Yeah,
That's why they got very detailed.
Yeah.
The way it's written, it
You
feels like,
shall and you shall not.
it's written, if we were to
Good
say
clues, good
scalability for hiring a new clerk and collector, this person feels like a unicorn in our system. Like, are we looking for another unicorn that's gonna be able to manage this great experience and budgets and take cash and what they can and can't do in all these millions of
There
things?
again, I'm putting my business hat on. This is a CFO position.
Well, not really, cause the clerk is the record keeper for the city. So the clerk keeps all the official records. Clerk has all the official records for the city. So that's a whole nother animal than the finance section, right? So that's why I say I'm not really a CFO, because
It's
for one
admin.
thing, CFO usually manages the budget too. I don't have the budget, so I'm only like half of a CFO and I'm half of a clerk.
Half of a
and-
half.
Well, I have to come up with another 3-letter something for you. then.
Yes. The other thing I wanted to point out that's obvious, but I think it is a critical difference, the resources that you are managing are basically the monies of the individual citizens and through their taxes primarily. And that's a fundamental difference from a business.
And rate.
You know, a business generally, it's a profit margin within professional limits. You are there to be as profitable as you can, provide a basic service, you know, follow the safety guidelines that the federal government came up with after 100 or plus years of people chopping their arms off and getting blinded by chemical, you know, all the
There's not really,
workplace
there's not really
problems.
fiduciary duty.
Right, but I think that is a very important distinction when the monies being managed are directly from the people versus a purely profit margin. So I would say that the business model only goes so far when you're dealing with the public good.
I'd be interested to see what the roles and responsibilities as clear for Jonathan and our treasurer, right? And it feels like over the years it's gotten convoluted, like you share different things, and this is our opportunity to tear it apart and then put it back into a model that is scalable and prepared for growth, right? And I hear clerk manages like public records requests, that's operations to me, like if people are, that's communication, that's client experience. Same as taking money, you know, money's gonna go in a bank account, you're gonna swipe it, it goes in through the register, it's not like we're counting and all these different checks and balances, receipts at the end of the day and reconciling every single day, like a lot of our systems currently do that for us.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
Not
well,
in the
it should.
Not in the government.
It should, and if we had a
It should.
if we had a CFO that took on those bigger picture initiatives of process improvement, what can we do, how do we improve this, how do we make this better, how do we make this more efficient, and somebody was focused on CFO for the city, aside from COO or CEO, but somebody had that focus, it's scalable to say, you're accountable for this, right? What are the 3 things you're gonna do this year that's gonna make this better? What does this look like as we scale? How do we prevent operational errors like the water management and all of the billing stuff? I heard a million different things this year about it.
Yeah, well,
But there's a shared responsibility here that probably needs to be split back off. Does that make sense? Are you, right now in the water division, are you accountable for a plan to make sure that all the water meters are up to date, repaired or replaced across the city over the 10 years?
That's the issue. There is no water division or water department. There is a utilities operational division that includes underground utilities, lift stations, 2 wastewater treatment plants in the lab.
Which is you.
That's utilities, that's operations. Then there's a utilities billing division, which is under the clerk. So that there is no like water department.
So water department went away a few years ago.
There's never been a water department. It's always been, you have operations and you have billing. They're separate. I guess some of the meters themselves kind of used to be
the
under
meter readers used to be.
the meter readers only. That was, but now really we don't, we have towers and stuff, so you don't.
I just put a bucket over my ears.
It has to be metal. Then we'll just estimate you.
I know.
You wear
Believe
an
me.
aluminum hat too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect that to be your skill set, to make sure that we have a water meter replacement plan for the next 10 years.
No,
Right, and that's not what you're accountable to.
but that's what I'm held responsible for.
Right.
When the meters don't work or the meter readers don't work, I'm held responsible for that.
I would imagine you're only responsible for, hey, we're paying for this, paying the county
The
for
meter
this money. we gotta
says
make sure it
you owe
gets out.
5 units, we're gonna bill you for 5 units, that's what I'm responsible for.
Somebody else should be accountable to the operational plan for execution of
You
it.
would think.
So we got some work to do on the city clerk side. But I say we wrap up and we kind of start with a different set, clean lens for next time.
Okay,
We've done a lot today and we've given
We
you guys a lot
did.
of homework.
Yes, that's good.
Okay.
All right.
A motion to adjourn, I guess.
Yes.
so I make a motion to adjourn at 2:34.
2024.
I'm sorry, 2:24.
Second, all in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Good deal. Good job today, guys.
It was good.